You wake to the sound of your father's alarm at 0500 hours. Your first breath carries the scent of fresh-pressed uniforms, black coffee, and the leather of his briefcase that never leaves his side. Your father isn't just any military officer. He's a three-star general who sits in climate-controlled rooms deciding which parts of the world require American intervention. The architect of strategies that move carrier groups across oceans and deploy battalions to deserts. The man whose PowerPoint presentations to the Joint Chiefs determine where young soldiers will die this year. You're born into a world where war is always somewhere else, where maps on screens show conflict zones as colored polygons, where casualty estimates appear as acceptable percentages in risk assessment matrices. Your childhood home isn't one place but a series of military bases across the globe. Fort Bragg when you're young, Ramstein Air Base in Germany during elementary school, back to the Pentagon when your father's star rises high enough. From your earliest memories, you're surrounded by the machinery of American power. Black SUVs with tinted windows, men in suits and uniforms speaking in acronyms you learn before you learn algebra. Conversations that stop abruptly when children enter rooms. Security clearances that determine which parent-teacher conferences your father can attend. This is your normal. This is what you think every family lives like. Your father appears in your life in brief scheduled intervals. He returns from classified meetings smelling of recycled air and tired determination. He misses your baseball games but never misses his morning briefings. He knows the names of foreign generals and warlords better than he knows your teachers' names. But when he is present, he's completely focused. He teaches you chess, explaining it as simplified strategic planning. He shows you maps, pointing to countries you'll study in school next year. He talks about service, duty, and the burden of making decisions that protect people who'll never know your sacrifice. You're 8 years old and you believe your father is a hero. The other military kids on base treat you with deference because of his rank. Your teachers give you extra attention because generals' children are future leaders. You wear the reflected glory of his stars like armor. One night, you sneak out of bed to get water. You find your father in his study, still in uniform at midnight. 3 computer monitors glow with maps, satellite images, and columns of data. He doesn't hear you approach. You watch him move a digital marker on a map, then type numbers into a spreadsheet. The header reads, Projected Civilian Impact Assessment. The numbers are in thousands. He notices you and quickly minimizes the screens. He smiles, tired but warm, and walks you back to bed. He tells you he's working on keeping people safe, that sometimes hard decisions require staying up late, that the work is complicated but necessary. You believe him completely. Because you're 8, and fathers don't lie about important things. Your education happens in duty schools, where half your classmates have parents with security clearances. You learn history from textbooks that frame every American war as necessary intervention. You study geography focused on strategic choke points and resource corridors. Your teachers are often retired military who speak of service with reverence and protest with contempt. By middle school, you can identify countries by their strategic importance rather than their capitals. You know which nations have oil, which have rare earth minerals, which control crucial shipping lanes. You understand that American foreign policy isn't about spreading democracy. It's about maintaining the system that keeps your father employed and your family comfortable. But you don't see this as cynicism. You see it as sophisticated realism. At 14, your father receives his 3rd star. The promotion comes with assignment to strategic planning at the Pentagon. You move to a house in Arlington with a view of the Washington Monument. Your new school is full of senators' children and lobbyists' kids. Everyone's parent shapes policy in some way. Everyone's family benefits from the system. Your father's work intensifies. He leaves before dawn and returns after dinner. His security detail becomes more obvious. His name appears in news articles about unnamed senior military officials. You start to understand that your father isn't just following orders. He's creating them. One evening, a documentary crew interviews him for a program on military innovation. You watch from the doorway as he explains next-generation warfare. Precision strikes that minimize collateral damage. Drone technology that removes American soldiers from harm. Cyber capabilities that can disable enemy infrastructure without firing a shot. He speaks with genuine passion about saving American lives through technological superiority. The interviewer asks about civilian casualties. Your father's answer is practiced, smooth. Every casualty is tragic, but the alternative to precise American intervention is often far worse. We use the most advanced targeting systems in human history. Collateral damage, while never acceptable, is dramatically reduced compared to conventional warfare. The words sound reasonable, compassionate even, but you notice he never says the number. Never quantifies what dramatically reduced means. Never explains who decides what level of civilian death is acceptable. At 16, you're old enough to access internet forums your father would prefer you avoid. You find leaked documents, first-hand accounts, images that don't match the sanitized briefings. A strike your father's team planned shows up in investigative journalism. The Pentagon statement says, militant compound neutralized, minimal collateral damage. The photographs show a wedding party. The casualty count lists 23 civilians, including 7 children. You confront your father over dinner. He doesn't get angry. Instead, he becomes very quiet, very serious. He explains that you're seeing enemy propaganda designed to undermine American resolve. That terrorist organizations stage scenes and inflate casualty numbers. That classified intelligence he can't share with you justified the strike. That the alternative was allowing militants to plan attacks that would kill hundreds of Americans. He asks you a question that will haunt you for years. If you could press a button that kills one innocent person but saves 100 American lives, would you press it? What about 10 innocents to save 100 Americans? Where's the line, and who gets to decide? You don't have an answer. He continues, that's my job, drawing those lines, making those calculations, living with those decisions. It's not glorious, it's not clean, but someone has to do it. And I do it so you and millions of other Americans can sleep safely. You want to argue, but his logic has a terrible internal consistency. Someone does have to make these decisions. Better a careful, moral person like your father than someone who doesn't care. Better precise American strikes than the chaos of inaction. You choose to believe him, because the alternative is believing your father is responsible for atrocities. And that's not a thought you can hold while still loving him. Your senior year, your father is promoted to 4 stars. He's now one of the handful of officers who directly advise the president on military action. His recommendations become policy more often than not. The family attends a ceremony at the White House. The president pins the 4th star and speaks about your father's invaluable service to the nation. Your mother cries with pride. Your younger sister takes selfies with senators. You stand in the Rose Garden, surrounded by power, wondering how many of the smiling faces have blood on their hands. And whether your own hands are clean just because you're not the one pressing the buttons. You attend Georgetown on a full scholarship reserved for children of senior military officials. Your classmates are the next generation of the security establishment. Future diplomats, intelligence analysts, defense contractors, and politicians. You major in international relations because it's expected. You join the right clubs, make the right connections, follow the path laid out for people like you. But you also start paying attention to what's not in the official curriculum. You read Chomsky alongside Kissinger. You study casualty databases alongside strategic doctrine. You attend protests while maintaining your security clearance. You're trying to hold 2 contradictory realities in your head simultaneously. Your father is a good man who loves his family and serves his country. Your father is also responsible for decisions that end lives in countries most Americans can't locate on a map. During your sophomore year, a major leak exposes classified planning documents. Debates about acceptable civilian casualty ratios. Cost-benefit analyses comparing American military deaths to foreign civilian deaths at exchange rates that value American lives exponentially higher. Contingency plans for escalation that include scenarios you hope never become reality. Your father's name isn't in the documents, but you recognize his analytical style in the frameworks. This is how he thinks, how he's trained to think, how the entire system is designed to think. Reduce human lives to data points, frame mass death as regrettable but necessary, classify the evidence and classify the guilt. The leak causes a scandal that burns hot for 3 weeks, then disappears under the next news cycle. Nobody is prosecuted, nobody resigns. The system absorbs the criticism and continues unchanged. Your father calls you, asks if you're okay, if anyone's harassing you because of your connection to him. You ask him if the documents are real. He's quiet for a long time. The world is more complicated than you can understand from a college campus, he finally says. These decisions involve variables and intelligence you're not clear to know. Judgment without full information is just self-righteous ignorance. He's right, technically. You don't have access to classified intelligence. You can't know what threats were prevented, what worse alternatives were avoided. But you also know that, trust us, we know better, is how every atrocity in history gets justified. You graduate with honors and receive offers from think tanks and defense contractors. Jobs that pay six figures right out of college. Positions that keep you adjacent to power. A path that leads exactly where your father's path led. You turn them all down. Instead, you join an NGO that monitors civilian casualties in conflict zones. Your father doesn't speak to you for 6 months. Your work takes you to places that exist in your father's world only as coordinates on targeting maps. Villages where strikes happened. Hospitals that were destroyed. Families that lost children to what the Pentagon calls tragic but unavoidable outcomes of complex military operations. You interview survivors who describe the sound of drones circling overhead for hours before the strike. The terror of knowing death is watching but not knowing when it will come. Children who don't play outside because the sky might explode. Old men who curse America with their last breaths. You document everything meticulously, professionally. You write reports that will be read by UN officials who lack enforcement power. By journalists who'll write stories that most Americans won't read. By your father's colleagues who'll dismiss your findings as enemy propaganda. But you keep doing it because someone has to witness. Someone has to remember the names that appear in Pentagon reports only as casualty statistics. Your father reaches out after a year. You meet at a restaurant halfway between the Pentagon and your cramped DC apartment. He looks older, more tired than you remember. He orders coffee and speaks carefully. I read your reports, he says. They're well-researched, professional. Also completely divorced from strategic reality. He explains again about threats you can't see, about intelligence that can't be declassified, about the impossibility of zero-casualty warfare, about the burden of choosing between bad options and worse options. Then he asks you a new question. What would you have done differently? And you realize you don't have a complete answer. You can document the harm, but you can't propose an alternative strategy that solves the underlying problems. You can condemn the civilian deaths, but you can't guarantee that inaction wouldn't lead to worse outcomes. You can judge his decisions, but you've never had to make them yourself. The conversation ends in stalemate. He returns to the Pentagon to plan tomorrow's operations. You return to your work, documenting yesterday's consequences. Years pass. Your father retires with full honors, awards for distinguished service, speaking fees from defense contractors, board positions with weapons manufacturers. A memoir ghostwritten to emphasize difficult decisions made with noble intentions. He's treated as an elder statesman, his counsel sought by the next generation of planners. In his world, he's a success story, a patriot who served with distinction, a strategist whose expertise kept America safe. You attend his retirement ceremony because your mother asks you to. You sit in the audience while generals praise his clear-eyed realism and unwavering commitment to American security. While politicians thank him for his service to the nation, while contractors celebrate the relationships he'll bring to their boards. Nobody mentions the numbers you've spent years compiling. The villages destroyed, the families shattered, the children who'll never grow old enough to understand why they had to die for American strategic interests. After the ceremony, your father finds you outside. I know you think I'm a monster, he says. I know you believe I have blood on my hands. And you're not entirely wrong. It's the closest he's ever come to acknowledging doubt. But I also prevented countless scenarios you'll never know about. Stopped threats that would have killed thousands. Made choices that minimize suffering even when I couldn't eliminate it. History will judge me, but it won't have access to the classified alternatives I prevented. He's probably right about that too. The classified files that might justify or condemn his decisions won't be declassified for decades. By then, everyone involved will be dead, and the judgment will be made by people who didn't live through the choices. You're 35 years old now. Your father is 70, playing golf and serving on corporate boards. You still work documenting the human cost of decisions made by people like him. The work has made you cynical, but hasn't given you better answers. You've seen enough to know that American military intervention often creates more problems than it solves. But you've also seen what happens in power vacuums when America withdraws. You know that your father's calculations result in deaths that could be prevented. But you also know that the alternatives often involve different deaths, not fewer deaths. The moral clarity you had in college has degraded into moral confusion. And perhaps that's the real legacy of being raised inside the machine. Not certainty about right and wrong, but understanding that most people making these decisions aren't monsters. They're humans trying to navigate impossible choices with incomplete information and competing values. Your father dies at 74. A heart attack, quick and relatively painless. The funeral is a military affair with full honors, flags, salutes, a 21-gun salute. Generals and politicians deliver eulogies about his service and sacrifice. The president sends a letter. The ceremony is beautiful and terrible. You stand at the grave knowing that this man was both the father who taught you to ride a bike and the strategist whose decisions ended lives. That he loved his family and his country with genuine devotion. That he also treated foreign civilians as acceptable losses in equations balancing American interests. That these contradictions don't cancel out. They just coexist in the same person, the same system, the same history. In his papers, you find a letter addressed to you, written years ago to be opened after his death. You chose to witness the costs. I chose to bear the decisions. We were both serving something larger than ourselves, just from different positions. Neither of us solved the fundamental problem, that protecting some requires sacrificing others, and someone has to decide who counts more. I don't ask for your forgiveness. I don't claim I was always right. I only claim I did what I believed was necessary with the information I had. History will judge whether I served my country or disgraced it. But you'll have to decide whether you can love the father while condemning the general. That burden is mine to give you and yours to carry. You spend the rest of your life trying to answer questions that don't have clean solutions. You continue documenting casualties because someone must. You advocate for policy changes that might reduce harm. You push for transparency that might enable accountability. But you also carry your father's question. If you had the same information, the same pressure, the same responsibility, would you choose differently? Would your choices result in less suffering or just different suffering? Would your moral clarity survive contact with actual decision-making power? You'll never know, because you chose to witness rather than decide, to document rather than direct, to judge rather than execute. And that choice, too, comes with its own costs. The people you might have saved if you'd chosen power instead of principle. The changes you might have made from inside instead of protesting from outside. The burden of criticism without the burden of responsibility. You are the son of a Pentagon strategic planner, raised inside the machine that projects American power across the globe. Educated in the logic that transforms human lives into strategic calculations. Connected by blood to decisions that shaped modern history. And you carry both the privilege and the guilt of that inheritance. Unable to fully condemn the man who raised you. Unable to fully defend the decisions he made. Just trying to bear witness to the human cost of strategy. Knowing that bearing witness changes nothing. But unable to stop because silence would be worse.